Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Mr. Cobalt, and in this video I'm going to be going over the difference between a law and a theory, a scientific law and a theory. So if you've come to this video, you're probably wondering, what's the difference between a law and a theory? They seem to be the same. I'm confused. But before we get into it, make sure you like, share, subscribe to this video, subscribe to my channel, and spread it around to help me out. So, what's the difference between a law and a theory? Well, you can think of it in terms of one explains what is going on, and the other one explains the why. So, there's a difference between a what and a why. So, a scientific law is a general description of our observations of what is going on in the world around us. We're describing what's happening, right? We're making a statement of what is true about our observations. So this could be things like the famous law of conservation of energy or the law of conservation of mass that was shown or formulated by Lavoisier. So all that is saying is that there is a observations of how during a chemical reaction, the amount of mass you start with is the same as the amount of mass you end up with in the product. So if you have weigh out your reactants and you find that there's 50 grams of reactants, and then after the reaction you collect all of your products and you get the mass of those, it'll weigh 50 grams in the end. So you don't lose any mass. And so that is a law, that is a description of what we observe. Every single time we do a chemical reaction, you observe that there's this conservation of mass. There's no explanation of why that occurs. It's just an observation of what we do observe. So that would be an example of a scientific law. Scientific laws describe, they don't explain. That's where the scientific theory comes in. So, scientific theory is also known as a model. So, in science, we come up with these models, which are representations of what we think is going on behind the scenes to explain what we're observing. So, we use models. One example is the atomic model. The atomic model is a representation of what we think an atom looks like or how it's behaving and things like that. So we use these models to help us explain things. It's usually a very simplified version or a more simplified version than what actually is the case. But it's the best that we've got right now. So here, the scientific theory is a set of tested hypotheses that give an overall explanation. So the key word here is explanation. Here we're actually trying to explain our observations. So when we're trying to explain the scientific laws, for example, the law of conservation of mass, we are trying to explain, well, why is it that every time when we run a reaction, we get the same amount of products that we get from our reactants. Now, that doesn't happen all the time in lab experiments, and we'll explain later why that is. Most of it has to do with you just end up naturally losing some of your product out into the environment. You can't capture everything all the time. But um, Lavoisier did hundreds, maybe even thousands of experiments where he actually was meticulously careful in making sure that he got all his products. He didn't lose any gases. He didn't. He collected everything there, and he was actually able to show that in each and every case, when the scientific procedure was done correctly and you captured all of the materials, you always got the same amount of product back from the reactant that you got. So if you started off with 75 grams of reactants and it reacted completely, then you got the same amount of product, 75 grams in this case. So the theory is explaining that. So a theory that we use to explain the conservation of mass is the atomic theory, right? The atomic theory says that all matter is made up of atoms, and that in a chemical reaction, you don't lose any of those atoms. You just get them rearranged in the process. So if all there is going on in the reaction is just atoms being pulled apart and then being brought together into different combinations, then of course you're going to have the same mass because you're not losing any atoms, and so the mass stays the same. So that is an explanation of why we see that matter is always conserved in chemical reactions. And so that theory, that model, is explaining why that happens. The scientific law is telling us what happens. What are we seeing in the world around us? The theory is meant to explain that. And so that's the difference between a scientific law and a scientific theory. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and put a comment down in the comment section. Let me know what you think, and if you have any other questions you would like me to cover. Thanks, and have a great day.